Chapter 5, The 18th Century World, 1700 to 1775. So between this time period, 1700 to 1750, the population in the American colonies are going to grow dramatically. So you're going to have the colonies are going to reach over 1 million. So this increase is going to come from three main sources: natural growth, immigration, and forced labor. A major factor in the natural increase was the lower age of marriage among colonial women, and women typically had 7 to 8 children, and they married in their late teens, so this gave a better survival rate of women having children and the ability for children to survive. So right now, with the way things had changed and the live-in conditions improving, more children were actually surviving to adulthood. So you have also enslaved African women are going to begin to have children in their teens, and they're going to bear roughly the same number of children. Of course, they're going to bear them into slavery. So that's how you're going to see an increase in slavery. So by the mid-18th century, the growth of the enslaved population was increasing. And this, of course, like I said before, was driven by natural reproduction rather than importing in slaves. So immigration also is going to play a role. At this time period, you're going to have immigration from mostly Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and Germany. So the Scottish Irish, they're going to flee famine, and they're also fleeing religious persecution that's going on in their homelands. So that is the largest immigrant group that comes over. Though often rejected in New England, they settled in the middle colonies and in the south. And then they're going to expand westward again into the Native American lands. The Germans, these are going to be more Lutherans. You're going to have Catholics, you're going to have Quakers, you're going to have the Amish, and the Mennonites. They're going to settle more in the back country areas of Pennsylvania all the way to the Carolinas. And they're going to build very prosperous farming type communities. Then again, you have the enslaved African population that's going to be in the mainland colonies, and they're going to experience growth. So at the eve of the American Revolution, you have gone from 2,000, 3,000 people in this colony, in the African American population in the colonies, to close to 300,000 at the eve of the American Revolution. That is a huge increase in enslaved people, and again, that's by natural reproduction, not transporting slaves over. A large reason for that is that the conditions of slavery in the North America versus Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, is that the sugar plantations were so brutal that a slave lived about 7 years and could not naturally reproduce. So overall in slavery, only 5% out of 100%, only 5% of slaves come from Africa to North America. The rest of that growth is all by natural reproduction, and of course the babies born right into slavery. So this surge is not really driven as much by the transatlantic slave trade, which becomes this huge industry global-wise. So the southern colonies, they're going to see the fastest growth as far as African enslaved people making up nearly 40% of the population before the American Revolution. By the time Congress bans the importation of enslaved people in 1808, you're going to have close to 5,000 slaves being brought into the United States over the time that it began in the 1600s. So many migrants to these colonies were not free. You also have indentured servants, and you have convicts who were sold into a different kind of slavery. So you have a mix of free and unfree, and migration creates this diverse population. And all of this is going to build the labor force needed for the colonies to expand their economic position. So again, most all of this is some form of enslaved labor. So the demographic transformation of the colonies lays this foundation for both economic development and this cultural diversity that is going to really shape the future of the United States. So also you have the American colonies, they're transforming into this capitalist society. So they're deeply connected to the whole Atlantic trade network. This isn't the slave trade, it's the Atlantic trade network. So this shift was driven by two major economic revolutions that changed how the people lived and worked. You have what's called the consumer revolution. This is going to mark a growing desire for goods like clothing, furniture, books, and household items. Because remember, their lives have improved, their living conditions have improved. They're not in little shacks. The people are in nice little houses. Sanitation, everything's improved. So they're healthier and they're in a better environment. So now they're going to look to desires, not just what they need to survive, but different desires that they want. So these products, once considered luxuries, they're going to become more widely available for anybody, for ordinary people to buy, not just the wealthy. So ordinary people are going to start buying these once considered luxury items, and they're going to participate in this culture of consumption. So colonists begin to care more about how they look and what they own, using their purchases to kind of express their status and identity. And this is really how we're going to start getting the gentry, the gentleman status, and all these different culture ideas based on what you have. And at the same time, you have what is the industrious revolution, okay? Not industrial. This isn't the industrial revolution with all the machines. This is the industrious revolution. Sorry. After 5 lectures, I'm a little bit spent. All right. So this is the idea of reshaping why you're working. What are the reasons that you're working? It's kind of reshaping the whole family's ideas. So instead of working just to meet your basic needs, just to put the food on the table, families begin to organize their time, their labor. They start to produce goods that they could actually sell, textiles, food, different crafts, and they want to earn money by utilizing all of their different talents. So they're earning money to, of course, pay for their household needs, but they want to take it a step further and organize as a family. Maybe the mom who usually sews clothing is making an extra shirt to sell, because they want to live a different life. They want to buy these goods. So this is an ideology of kind of pulling together as a family and figuring out what can we do to start bringing extra money in not to survive, but to have these luxury items. So this is going to have women and children. They're going to work longer and they're going to work harder. So together, these revolutions encourage this economic growth. And it's going to be supported by this rise in population, this increased use of natural resources, and it lays this foundation for a market-driven society in colonial America. So the market, wanting the luxury goods, the demands for the goods, is going to start driving the direction of the society. Okay, so this again is about the Industrial Revolution. It's going to we're discussing here just the dynamics, the family beginning to produce goods for market, not just for the family, but to sell at market. This shift that's going to increase production, it's going to intensify the labor requirements of the women and children, and it's going to just transform fundamentally how the family economic system is going to work, how they're going to use their money, and what is important to them. Most colonial wealth was generated through shipping and agriculture, with 80% of the population is working on farms or plantations. There's very little technological innovation at this time. So the colonial economy is being shaped and being defined by three major factors. The plentiful land, there's lots of land, the shortage of both labor and capital. So the family is going to serve as this core economic unit, with labor now being divided by gender. Men work the land while women manage children and domestic affairs. So the Industrial Revolution just transforms the structure of the family, and they're going, like I said, produce goods to be sold. So we've already talked in the last PowerPoint about the British mercantile system, and I went into more detail in that PowerPoint about how it worked. The mother country sending, requiring the colonies to send the raw materials, and they create the finished product, and they then ship it back to the colonies, which is their market. So I'm not going to go into any more on that since we already covered it. All right, so you have urban life. Urban is going to be city life, and rural is going to be your, your farming, your land. So colonial cities, they're going to locate at ports or where fur trade hubs were. And most of those hubs, of course, most of those commerce centers at this time during the 18th century are going to be around ports because they're going to ship their goods out. So each city is going to have these distinct commerce centers, and then the city grows around it. So you have a distinct social hierarchy that's going to also grow around the economic centers. So you have an elite class composed of your merchants, your professionals, and your government officials, and then you have a growing population of poor laborers. And of course, you have a huge gap in between the wealth and the poor. So in response to this rise in poverty rates, cities establish what's called almshouses, ALMHOUSES. Those are basically workhouses, not very good places. So, but that's what they're going to establish for the poor, desolate people, and this is going to be mostly women and children. And when we get further into the Industrial Revolution, oh my gosh, we'll go more into this. But in these workhouses, they were horrible conditions. It's basically you can stay and get fed, but you're pretty much going to be worked to death each day you stay. So you have these different divisions. You have these different social classes that are going to kind of foster these same experiences. Your different social classes, like we talked about before, you have the elite, you have the very poor. When we get into the Industrial Revolution, where you have the factories, you'll then have more of a middle class. So you have some definite hierarchy. So you're going to have theaters, taverns, religious revivals are going to bring people together, and you're going to have intentional spaces created for these different classes of people. Okay? Newspapers will play a crucial role in expanding the public sphere. It's going to allow these ideas to circulate beyond the city boundaries. Like we talked about before, you have a division between the rich and the poor, but you're going to also have, through this circulation of ideas, like the Enlightenment ideas that are going to come from France and circulate through the newspaper salons and pamphlets, you're going to have some common interest between the two divided social classes, the rich and the poor. So you do have some common interest in these different things. And that common interest, when it comes up, it's going to unite these people. So it's going to unite the ordinary people. It's going to unite the elite. It's going to unite the poor. And that unity is a part of the powerful force that's going to eventually push for independence. Okay, so rural society, this is farmland. These are rural areas, mostly land. This is going to, again, there's a shift in intensity, a concentration of wealth and social division. Rural is mostly farming communities, mostly south. The economy is going to be very dependent on enslaved labor. It's going to be very dependent on agricultural production. And you also have a hierarchy here too, right? You're going to have your wealthy slave holders. You're going to have your tobacco plantation farms, your rice plantation farms. Even though you're in a rural area, you're going to have a small farm and you're going to have a plantation. Okay, and so that is going to give you a social hierarchy too, separating the rich and the poor. You have luxury goods, you have fashion. Georgia in particular develops into a very strong slave society. You have, originally Georgia was just a colony that the British sent their poor, they sent their prisoners, and it was really just to kind of be a buffer colony to protect South Carolina from its borders and to produce different goods like wine, olives, and silk. But over time, Georgia really changes to a plantation model, and they are going to rise up, and they're going to also be very enslaved labor controlled. So these areas are also going to grow economically, and they will, like we talked about, they also have a different hierarchy. So the world slavery made. So this is kind of an introduction of slavery into the American colonies. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't something that just kind of happened. It was very purposeful. Okay, very decisions were made what labor could be used to support the economic growth and the expansion of colonial power. This was very decisive. It didn't just happen. An example of that is the colony of Georgia, which, was founded for completely different goals than what it was. So this is discussing how originally liquor and slavery are banned. The colony's not going to become successful. So, of course, all of this will be opened back up for the sake of money. So they're going to reverse all of the laws, and they're going to allow slavery. And this decision is just going to transform Georgia into this plantation-based economy. And like its other southern, neighbors who are plantation-based economies, which is based fully on slavery, enslaved labor, it's going to be the foundation of wealth and growth. This is how they're going to make their money. It's going to be made on inequality, exploitation, and this racial division. That's why it's considered the world that slavery made. Okay, the Stono Rebellion. This is one of the largest slave uprisings in the American colonies, and it's going to take place in 1739 in South Carolina. So it begins when you have 20 enslaved Africans. They break into a store and they steal weapons and ammunition, and they kill the storekeepers. So armed and determined, this group marches southward towards the Spanish Florida, hoping to find freedom. So along the way, they kill some white colonists, and they start to recruit other enslaved people to join their cause. So the rebellion quickly grew. By that same evening, colonial forces are going to catch up with the group. Many of the rebels are executed on sight. Excuse me. And the military is going to violently put the uprising down. However, this rebellion is going to terrify the slaveholders. So they're going to be worried, of course, that their enslaved people will think that they can do the same thing. So this is going to create stricter laws controlling their enslaved population. It's going to include limits on movement, education, gatherings. It's going to show that both desperation and courage of those who resist slavery will also be put down. But it's going to be overall, what's going to come out of the Stono Rebellion is this symbol of power, the power to fight for freedom in colonial America. All right, so we have two very different movements here, and these often get confused. They're both transatlantic movements, which means that you have the England, okay, the Europe continent, you have the Atlantic Ocean, and then you have the American continent, right? That's why it's transatlantic, okay? So the main thing you need to remember about this is one is intellectual, one is thought. Enlightenment is thought, intellectual, and the other is religious. Great Awakening is religious. Okay, let's talk a little bit about both. All right, so in the 18th century, America's going to be really changed by these two movements, the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening. And in past slides, we talked about John Locke and the Enlightenment. I think it was a past slide. I don't know. I've done 5 of these. Okay, so the Enlightenment is this time that you have John Locke, you have Montesquieu, you have all these French Enlightenment thinkers. And they're over in France where this Enlightenment movement is going on. these new ideas about, and this comes out of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution proves the heliocentric theory is the correct theory, not the geocentric theory, and it proves the Catholic Church wrong. So then these people start thinking, well, if the church, the Catholic Church, who controls everything in England, in Europe, was wrong about the universe, maybe they're wrong about this monarch. And this is when they start to apply the scientific principles from the scientific revolution to society. Is really the king and God in control? Did God appoint the king and then the king rules the people? Or did the people come first and the people are on top and the government serves the people? So this is what the Enlightenment movement is, and this is going to be the influence, the idea for the American Revolution. And like I said before, it is written into different documents. You have Thomas Jefferson, you have all your founding fathers. They're kind of going back and forth, and they're hearing these different ideas. They're reading the two treatises of government. They're reading Montesquieu. They're reading all these different ideas that are coming out. Okay, so the Enlightenment is a time when people begin to use reason and science to improve their understanding of the world. So, like I said, these thinkers, these Enlightenment philosophers, they believe that society can be made better through logic, through learning, through rejecting this superstition, these ideas that are in the Bible. It's not that they're rejecting the Bible, they're just this control. So one of the important things is the social contract theory, which we've talked about, the idea that actually governments are created by the people. Governments aren't created by God, like the monarch, and then the monarch controls the people. That governments are created, thought of, and created by the people. So therefore, the people are on top, and the government is to serve the people. Okay, and what the government is supposed to do, and we would be good to remember this in America, that it is us, the people, against the government, and the government should serve all the people. We're not political parties against each other. We should be one. So John Locke, his two treatises of government, which is what he wrote, his whole ideology is that you were born, all men were born with these natural rights. Just because you were born, you have the right to life, liberty, and at the time, property. And that if the government doesn't protect those rights, which is the very existence of the government to protect your rights, then you have the right to revolt. And of course, that little line, the right to revolt, is what the revolutionaries will use, the colonists will use to revolt for the American Revolution. So philosophers like John Locke are very inspired about individual rights, that everybody has these individual rights. But again, he's only going to say men, and that's going to come up as another issue during the Civil War, as is it just white men or is it also black men that have these rights? And then again, women were left out. So then you have also Adam Smith. He is going to write what's called The Wealth of Nations in 1776. And he's going to argue for free markets, free labor. And this, of course, is going to go exactly against mercantilism. So Adam Smith is pretty much saying, hey, we should be able to make our own table and sell our own table. We shouldn't have to ship the wood to Europe, let them make it, and then we're trapped and we have to buy that table because we're also their market. So these different humanitarian values, it's going to lead to some changes in the colonies. They're going to start to establish hospitals, mental health facilities, libraries, and they're going to start building this layer of intellectual foundation, starting to think intellectual, starting to kind of move away from religious superstition. And this is going to be a revolutionary thought for the colonies. And of course, it's going to lead to the revolution. So at the same time, you have the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening, again, a transatlantic movement, but it is a religious movement, whereas the Enlightenment is an intellectual movement. So the difference here with the Great Awakening is, and it's going to sweep across the American colonies during this time period, it emphasizes that all people are born sinners and that all people can feel their own depravity and without the aid of ministers. We're all equal under the eyes of God. So whereas before you had some of the different colonies that were strict on religion, both in their civic life and in their religious life, this is saying, no, you don't have to go through a minister. We're all equal under the eyes of God, and you can just go to God. So these revivals are going to begin with Jonathan Edwards. He's a young minister, and he's going to have some of his major revivals in 1734 and 1735. And he's very passionate. So his sermons are very passionate, very enthusiastic, and they're going to create this momentum. And then you're going to have George Whitefield come in 1739, and he's going to be even more dramatic. So they're going to start growing these, drawing these large crowds, thousands, to wherever he's setting up. Okay, and they're going to be like these tent revivals. They're going to build these big tents outside the colony, and everybody can come. The enslaved, the free, the male, the female, the rich, the poor. Remember, there were all these hierarchies before, right? Separation between the rich and poor. Women did this, men did that. You know, in the Puritan religions, the females could be, taken over by the devil because females were weak where the male wasn't. So Whitefield is going to just have these very dynamic sermons, and he's going to have these crowds of thousands come to him every time he goes to a colony. And he's going to deliver these messages of how humans are sinful, but there's divine mercy, and that all are welcome, and that all can have this. So if you are enslaved, if you are a free black, if you are a female, if you are poor, to hear that you are equal is going to really, really change things. It's going to really bring in a lot of people, and they're going to resonate at a very deep level with this. So this is going to offer spiritual comfort. It's going to challenge this idea of materialism and competitiveness in colonial society, and it's going to urge each individual to look within themselves, to transform their lives within themselves instead of worrying about moving through life dependent on social structures, that their life was really within themselves and they had the ability to change themselves, which is in direct contrast with this hierarchy society where you couldn't move up or down. You know, it depended on so many different materialistic features. Okay, so the outcome of the Great Awakening, it's just going to inspire education institutions like Princeton, Columbia, Brown, and it's going to change the way that colonial society moves. There's going to be this direction of individualism. Churches are going to split, and they're going to start. Before you had Catholic Church, you had Protestant Church, and Protestant was anything that was not Catholic. Protestant means not Catholic. So within that Protestant movement, you're going to have creations of even more different denominations. Okay, that is it.